After their son died, Shiloh quit every habit Manuel hated. No more blowing up his phone. No more crying when he stayed out all night. No more scenes. Even after a car crash, when the doctor told her to call family, she only said, "I'm an orphan. I don't have anyone." After their son died, Shiloh Shaffer quit every habit Manuel Preston hated. She stopped blowing up his phone when he stayed out all night. She didn't cry or pick a fight. After a car accident, the doctor told her to call her family. "I'm an orphan," she said. "I don't have anyone." The nurse looked closer. "You're Mrs. Preston, right?" "Mr. Preston's upstairs. Want me to get him?" That was when Shiloh realized she was in a Preston hospital. She shook her head, "No thanks." Half an hour later, Manuel came downstairs anyway. His cold stare landed on her, heavy enough to choke the room. "Why didn't you call me after the accident?" Shiloh looked down. "It's just a broken leg. Nothing serious." Casual tone got under his skin. He remembered how soft she used to be back when they were dating. Even a small cold had her curled in his arms, asking for comfort, kisses, and cuddles. Now her leg was broken, and she didn't even flinch. Before Manuel could speak, the nurses outside started whispering. "Mr. Preston spoils Miss Duffy like crazy. She only scraped her knee on set." And he freaked out, brought in a whole specialist team, and stayed with her the entire time. He carried her everywhere, too. Wouldn't even let her feet touch the floor. His chest tightened. Anger flashed across Manuel's face. But he still looked at Shiloh, waiting for her to get jealous. Lose it. She didn't even glance up. She lay quietly in the hospital bed. His mood sank lower. "Don't listen to them," he said. "Rainey hurt her knee while filming. I just happened to bring her in." That was it. Manuel's temper snapped. "You don't believe me?" "I do." Shiloh answered every question, but there was no emotion in her voice. "Rainey is your adopted sister. You grew up together. Of course you care about her." Before, Manuel would shut her down with that cold look. "Rainey is my sister. I can't just ignore her. She's family. Can you stop making a scene now?" Shiloh was doing exactly what he wanted. No tears, no fights. He should have been happy. Instead, his chest felt too heavy. Something's wrong. None of this feels right. Nurse pushed open the door. "Mr. Preston, Miss Duffy says her knee hurts. She wants you upstairs." Already on edge, Manuel snapped. "Then she should see a doctor." "I'm not one. Why are you calling me?" The nurse rushed out. Manuel looked at Shiloh, guilt in his eyes. "Are you still mad about our son?" "Rainey was wrong. I already chewed her out." He hesitated, then sat beside her bed. "We can have another baby." He took her hand. "I'll stay with you this week." Shiloh quietly pulled away. Manuel frowned, ready to snap, when something crashed outside the door. Rainey Duffy had fallen in the hallway, struggling with her crutches, and rushed over and lifted her into his arms. "Why are you out here again? Didn't I tell you to stay in bed?" "I heard Shiloh got in a car accident." Rainey looked pathetic. "I came to check on her." Then she pressed closer to Manuel, like Shiloh scared her. Her voice shook as she looked at Shiloh. "Shiloh, please don't be mad at me. I never meant for Zach to die." Before, Shiloh would have broken down. She would have screamed through tears, demanding to know why Manuel kept protecting the woman who got their son killed. Now she said nothing. She lay there with her eyes closed like she was asleep. Her face was pale. She looked painfully thin. In the doorway, she seemed painfully fragile. A dull ache settled in Manuel's chest. "I'll take Rainey upstairs first," he said quietly. "I'll be right back." He carried Rainey away. Manuel never came back that night. Instead, Shiloh got a call from the aerospace agency. "Professor Shaffer, are you sure you want to join the space elevator project? It's classified. Once you're in, you'll be based there for decades. No outside contact, not even with your husband." "I'm sure," Shiloh said calmly. "I already filed for divorce in a week. Once the waiting period is over, I'll get the signed decree. No more ties. A project cut off from the world is exactly what I need." The person on the line sounded stunned. "Professor Shaffer, are you serious? Everyone at the agency knows how much you love Manuel. You gave up so many chances for him. Otherwise, you could have been our chief engineer by now." Pain cut through Shiloh's chest. She was an engineer, calm, logical, steady under pressure. Except with Manuel. The second he was involved, all that logic disappeared. Her whole world had revolved around him. Shiloh fell for Manuel twice. Once at first sight, then all over again over the years. They've been classmates since elementary school. Everyone called them the school's genius duo. Every test ended the same way. Manuel took first, Shiloh came in second. She hated always coming in second. Every time, she studied even harder, determined to beat him. And every time she still lost. Worst part, he barely studied, still stayed on top like it was nothing. Shiloh acted like he was her rival. Secretly, she'd been in love with him forever. Senior year, she finally got the nerve to ask. Face burning, she said, Manuel, if I beat you on the SAT, will you be my boyfriend? He expected him to shut her down. Instead, he leaned in, his breath warm against her ear. If you get a perfect score and win nationals in science, I'll marry you because of that one promise. Shiloh went all in. Her senior year, she got a perfect 16 on the SAT and took first at the biggest high school science competition in the country. Manuel kept his word in front of the whole country. He proposed in the most over-the-top way possible. Hundreds of helicopters dropped rose petals over the city until the skyline disappeared under flowers. Shiloh Shaffer, I love you. When we're old enough, will you marry me? He dropped to one knee in a sea of roses. Back then, Shiloh thought she was the luckiest girl alive. She learned the truth later. That huge proposal wasn't because he'd always loved her. It was damage control, a way to bury the scandal involving him and his adopted sister. That year, Shiloh was everywhere. Perfect 16, valedictorian. For first place at the country's biggest high school science competition. The media couldn't get enough of her. Manuel knew their story could drown out his scandal. Professor Shaffer, are you still there? The caller asked carefully. You went quiet. Are you having doubts? I get it. You love Mr. Preston so much. Shiloh cut him off. I don't regret it. I never will. I stopped loving him a long time ago. The words had barely left her mouth when the door swung open. Manuel stood there, his cold stare dark and furious. Stop loving me, he said. Shiloh, say that again. Shiloh had already been lying in bed when she took the call. She immediately hung up, closed her eyes, and pretended to be asleep. Manuel stormed in, anger rolling off him. Then he saw her closed eyes. So, she's been talking in her sleep. Relief hit him, followed by irritation. Even in her dreams, he wouldn't let Shiloh stop loving him. He shook her awake. Shiloh, did you have a nightmare? I heard you crying about not loving me anymore. What were you dreaming about? Why were you crying like that? Shiloh looked down. Nothing. I dreamed about Zach. He was crying, asking why Mom and Dad didn't love him. Pain cut through Manuel's chest. He pulled her into his arms. Zach's death was an accident. Stop blaming yourself. After a beat, he added, we're still young. We can have more kids, as many as we want. Shiloh said nothing. Her heart had gone cold. She couldn't even cry anymore. Yeah, I'm young. I can have more kids. So what? My son is dead. Would another child erase any of this? She didn't have the energy to argue with Manuel. Instead, she changed the subject. You came here in the middle of the night. What do you want? Manuel froze. Suddenly awkward. Rainy's stomach hurts. He wants that soup you make. Shiloh went still. She'd just been in a car accident. Her leg was broken. And Manuel woke her up in the middle of the night to cook for Rainy. He must have realized how bad it sounded. You don't have to get up, he added fast. Just tell me how to make it. I'll do it. Manuel had always had a sensitive stomach. Whenever it acted up, Shiloh made him soup. She'd gone through countless nutrition guides and home remedy books until she came up with her own chicken soup recipe. But Shiloh had stomach issues, too. She'd wrecked her stomach by pushing herself too hard. During senior year, Manuel never noticed. 5 years of marriage, and he'd never cooked her a meal, never made her soup. She'd been the only one in love. A bitter smile touched her lips. Bring me a pen and paper. I'll write it down. Manuel ordered someone to get them. But when Shiloh handed him the recipe, his chest tightened. He remembered the last time he'd asked for it. Back then, she'd smiled and said, I'll give it to you after we're divorced. As long as we're married, I'll always make it for you. Now she gave it to him, without hesitating. Unease settled in his chest. For some reason, he felt like he was losing her for good. He needed to say something, do something, anything to keep her. After a long silence, he said, Tomorrow's Zach's wake. I'll go with you. We'll stay for visitation and go to the funeral together. Shiloh went still, but she didn't open her eyes. The nurse spoke from the doorway. Mr. Preston, Miss Duffy's been treated. She's stable, but she's scared and keeps asking for you. Okay, Manuel said. He looked back at Shiloh. Get some rest. We'll go home tomorrow and say goodbye to Zach. The night dragged on forever. Shiloh lay awake until dawn. The funeral was the next day. The child she'd carried for 9 months and brought into the world would be cremated, sealed in an urn, and laid to rest. Manuel showed up the next morning. and drove Shiloh back to the Preston estate. The second she stepped inside, Manuel's mother, Olivia, rushed her like a lunatic. "You evil woman. How dare you come back here?" She slapped Shiloh twice, grabbed her hair, and started hitting her. "This is all your fault," Olivia screamed. "You killed my grandson. You knew Zach couldn't swim, but you still took him surfing. You wanted him dead." Shiloh froze. Rainey was the one who took Zach to the beach. "Why is Olivia blaming me?" She looked at Manuel. He looked away. The mourners closed in, joining Olivia as they cursed and shoved her. "Kill her. What kind of mother kills her own son? Throw her out. She has no right to be at Zach's funeral." Today was already the worst day of Shiloh's life. Her son was dead. No one could understand that kind of grief. Even with a broken leg, she dragged herself here to say goodbye. But the Prestons threw her out of the memorial room. They beat her with canes, threw rocks at her, dumped all their hate on a mother who had just lost her child. A rock hit Shiloh's forehead and blood ran down her face. Someone ripped away her crutch and beat her with it. She collapsed, her clothes and skin smeared with blood. "Stop." Manuel rushed over and shielded her. "Have you all lost your minds? Zach's death was an accident. Shiloh had nothing to do with it. Anyone who touches her again answers to me." His gaze swept the crowd as head of the Preston family. No one dared challenge him. The crowd scattered. Only then did Manuel's face soften. He carried Shiloh upstairs, grabbed the first aid kit, and treated her wounds himself. Shiloh didn't look grateful. She stared at him, ice cold. "Manuel, Rainey took Zach surfing. Why did your mother accuse me of killing him?" His hand froze around the gauze. "You know Rainey's place in this family is complicated," he said. "She grew up as one of us. Then everyone found out she'd been switched at birth. Family already resents her. If they learn she played a part in Zach's death, they'll cut her off for good." He hesitated. "But you're different. You're my wife. As long as I'm here, no one will disrespect you. Take the blame for Rainey. I'll make it up to you by transferring half of Preston Corp's shares to you." He looked at Shiloh uneasy. He expected anger, tears, for her to ask why he always chose Rainey over her instead. Her calm scared him. She didn't argue, didn't complain. She only glanced at him. "Whatever you want, I don't care." He agreed. He should have felt relieved. Instead, his thoughts spiraled. "Don't get the wrong idea. Rainey is just family to me," Manuel said, even though she hadn't asked. "We grew up together. I've always seen her as my real sister. Then we found out she'd been switched at birth. The second the truth came out, she lost everything. Everyone in the Preston family turned on her. I couldn't." "I understand," Shiloh said, eyes lowered. "You don't have to explain. Only people in love needed explanations. She didn't love him anymore. She didn't need one from him." Manuel looked even more annoyed. Before he could speak, a maid rushed in. "Mr. Preston, something happened." Miss Duffy came to pay respects to Zach, but she ran into Miss Preston. "They're fighting downstairs." "I meant Christy Preston, the family's biological daughter." Before coming back to the Prestons, Christy had lived through hell. Her adoptive father had even sexually abused her. She hated Rainey. Every time she saw her, she went after her, hitting, kicking, no mercy. Rainey never fought back. She dropped to the floor and played the victim. The second Manuel heard Christy and Rainey were fighting, he panicked. He sat down the gauze and stood. "Shiloh, bandaged yourself. I need to go downstairs before Christy tears the house apart." Without waiting for an answer, he rushed out. Shiloh almost laughed. Christy was Manuel's real sister, yet he never cared about the years she'd spent beaten, abused, and hurt by her adoptive father. No, he only cared about Rainey's fake tears. Downstairs, Manuel faced the whole family with Rainey hiding behind him. Christy's sobs carried all the way upstairs. "And well, I'm your real sister. Why have you never once taken my side? Why do you always choose Rainey?" She cried until her voice went raw. "You've always been like this. You're just as cruel to Shiloh. That manipulative girl keeps setting her up, and you fall for it every time. That's why Shiloh's done with you. Haven't you noticed she barely talks to you anymore? Because she finally sees you for who you are. She stopped expecting anything from you." Downstairs, the heavy silence of the Preston estate was shattered by Christy's raw, broken sobs. "You've always been like this," Christy yelled, her voice echoing off the marble pillars of the foyer. "You're just as cruel to Shiloh. That manipulative snake keeps setting her up, and you fall for it every single time. That's why Shiloh's done with you. Haven't you noticed she barely looks at you anymore? She stopped expecting anything from you." Manuel's face turned deathly pale. His hand, still holding Rainey's shoulder, twitched. "Shut up, Christy. You don't know what you're talking about. I don't. Christy laughed hysterically, tears streaming down her bruised cheeks. Look at yourself, Manuel. Your wife is upstairs bleeding with a broken leg. Your son is in a box waiting to be burned to ash, and here you are, shielding the girl who brought him to the ocean. Enough, Manuel roared. The authority in his voice vibrated through the room, silencing the gathered relatives. But deep inside his chest, an unseen crack spread wider. Upstairs, Shiloh sat on the edge of the bed. She didn't bother using the crutch. With cold, methodical precision, she wrapped the white gauze around her own bloodied forehead. The pain in her body was nothing compared to the vast, empty void inside her heart. She stood up, leaning her weight on her good leg, and limped slowly toward the door. When she reached the top of the grand staircase, the entire hall fell dead, silent. Everyone looked up at her. She was wearing a simple, dark gray dress. Her long hair was tied back casually, and her pale face was devoid of any expression. Blood stained the white bandage on her forehead, but she didn't seem to care. Manuel looked up, his eyes widening. Shiloh, I told you to rest upstairs. Shiloh didn't answer him. She limped down the steps, one agonizing stare at a time. Manuel instinctively took a step forward to catch her, but she held up a hand, a simple, flat gesture that froze him in his tracks. She walked past him, past Rainey, and past her mother-in-law, Olivia, who was still glaring at her with venomous hatred. Shiloh stopped in front of the central shrine where little Zach's urn sat, surrounded by white lilies. She reached out, her fingers gently brushing the cold ceramic surface of the urn. Shiloh, Olivia sneered, stepping forward. Don't you dare touch my grandson. You killed him. Mother, stop. Manuel barked, his voice laced with rare panic. He rushed over to Shiloh's side. Shiloh, let the servants move the urn to the family hearse. We're heading to the cemetery now. No. Shiloh spoke for the first time. Her voice was flat, dry like autumn, leaves crushing underfoot. Manuel frowned. What do you mean, no? The Preston family plot is all prepared. Zach belongs in the grand vault. He isn't a Preston anymore, Shiloh said quietly, picking up the small urn and holding it tightly against her chest. He was my son. He died because he was taken where he didn't belong. I won't leave him in a place filled with people who hated his mother. Shiloh Shaffer. Olivia screamed. How dare you? Manuel, look at your wife. She's taking away our family heir's ashes. Shiloh, give me the urn, Manuel said, his patience wearing thin though a strange panic clutched at his throat. He reached out to grab her wrist. Don't act like this in front of everyone. It's embarrassing. Zach is my son, too. Shiloh looked up at him. Her dark eyes were like deep, bottomless wells of ice. There was no anger, no hatred, no betrayal, just a complete and absolute absence of warmth. You lost the right to call him your son the moment you asked me to take the blame for the woman who let him drown, she said. The entire living room gasped. Manuel's heart stopped. He felt as if someone had plunged a blade directly into his ribs. Shiloh, I told you, that was for the family's reputation. I don't care, Shiloh interrupted softly. She turned on her heel, cradling the urn, and limped toward the front door. Stop her, Olivia yelled. Manuel, don't let her leave. Rainey pulled on Manuel's sleeve, her eyes brimming with fresh tears. Manuel, I'm so sorry. It's all my fault. Shiloh hates me so much. Maybe I should just leave. Ordinarily, Manuel would immediately comfort Rainey, stroke her hair, and tell her everything was fine. But today, looking at Shiloh's small, limping figure, receding into the distance, a cold sweat broke out across his back. He shoved Rainey's hand off his sleeve. Manuel? Rainey froze, stunned. Stay here, Manuel said coldly. He turned and chased after Shiloh into the pouring rain. The rain pelted down furiously outside the Preston estate. Shiloh limped down the long driveway, holding Zach's urn close to her chest under her thin coat, keeping it dry while her own clothes soaked through. A black Bentley screeched to a halt beside her. Manuel slammed the door open, stepping into the storm without an umbrella. Shiloh, get in the car, he shouted over the roar of the wind. Your leg is broken. Are you trying to kill yourself? Shiloh didn't stop walking. Manuel grabbed her shoulder, forcing her to turn around. Look at me. What is wrong with you lately? I admitted Rainey was wrong. I offered you half of Preston Corp shares. What more do you want from me? Shiloh stood in the freezing rain, looking up at the man she had loved for 15 years. He looked handsome as always, but to her, he looked like a total stranger. I don't want your money, Manuel, she said softly. I don't want your company. I don't want anything from you. Then what do you want? Manuel yelled, frustrated beyond belief. Tell me.
I'll
give it to you. I want you to leave me alone, she replied. She turned and waved down a passing taxi that had just dropped off a neighbor. Before Manuel could stop her, she slid into the back seat, pulled the door shut, and locked it. Shiloh, open this door. Manuel banged on the window, his face contorted in anger and confusion. Shiloh. The taxi pulled away, leaving Manuel standing alone in the downpour. Over the next 3 days, Shiloh completely vanished from Manuel's sight. She stayed in a quiet, secluded hotel near the Aerospace Research Institute.
She
spent her days handling the final paperwork for her child's memorial service at a quiet, private columbarium on the edge of the city, far away from the Preston family plot. On the 4th day, Manuel finally tracked down her location. He didn't bring Rainey this time. He came alone, carrying a thermos of hot chicken soup made by the finest chef in the city, along with a bouquet of white roses, her old favorite. He knocked on her hotel room door. When Shiloh opened it, she was wearing a simple lab jacket, holding a stack of technical documents. Manuel's chest eased slightly when he saw her. He pushed past her into the room. You've been staying in a place like this? It's tiny. Come home, Shiloh.
My
mother went to stay at our villa in the south. She won't bother you anymore. He set the thermos and flowers on the table. I brought you soup. The chef used the recipe you wrote down. Shiloh stood by the open door, holding it open. Manuel, why are you here? Manuel took off his coat, trying to act natural, though his hands were trembling.
Slightly.
Tomorrow is the end of the official 7-day divorce waiting period. The lawyer told me you filed the paperwork online last week. He laughed nervously, picking up a pen from the desk. It's ridiculous.
A
divorce? Because of a fight? Shiloh, we've known each other since elementary
school.
You scored a 1600 on the SAT for me. You won the National Science Trophy. For me. You love me more than anyone in this world. Stop playing this game. Shiloh looked at him, her gaze utterly transparent. I didn't file it as a game, Manuel. I filed it because I am leaving. Leaving where? Manuel frowned, his annoyance returning. To your aerospace lab? You gave up your primary research years ago to handle our family estate. I took the offer, Shiloh said calmly. The space elevator project. Base 0. Manuel's eyebrows knitted together. Space elevator? What nonsense are you talking about? That project is classified. People who join those long-term base projects don't come back for decades. I know, Shiloh said. My departure date is in 3 days. Once the divorce decree is finalized tomorrow, I will enter the base. I will never see you again. Manuel's face drained of color. The thermos in his hand nearly slipped. You're lying, he whispered, his voice cracking. You're doing this to scare
me.
Because of Zach, because of Rainey. It has nothing to do with Rainey, Shiloh said gently. It has everything to do with me. I spent 15 years revolving around you, Manuel. I gave up my dreams, my talent, and my career just to be Mrs. Preston. And in return, I lost my son. I'm just taking my life back. Manuel stood in the center of the hotel room, feeling an unprecedented surge of terror. I won't sign it, he said sharply, pulling out his phone. I'm calling my lawyer. I will block the divorce. You can't leave. You don't need to sign anything, Shiloh replied indifferently. Because of the nature of the space elevator project, the National Defense Aerospace Act gives special authorization. Once a scientist signs a Class A classified assignment, any civil marital status can be unilaterally terminated upon request to protect national security assets.
She pointed to the desk.
On it lay an official red-stamped document bearing the seal of the Central Aerospace Commission. Manuel lunged forward, snatching the paper. His eyes scanned the text desperately. Professor Shiloh Shaffer has been officially appointed as Chief Systems Architect of Project Ether, Space Elevator Initiative. All personal legal ties, civil liabilities, and public registries are subject to immediate state clearance. Chief Systems Architect, Manuel muttered, his voice trembling. You were chosen for that. He remembered years ago, back in high school. The country's top aerospace directors had visited their school. They had ignored Manuel, the smooth-talking heir, and spent 3 hours begging Shiloh to sign an early track program. Shiloh had declined because Manuel told her he hated long-distance relationships. She had traded the stars for him, and he had given her a broken heart and a dead child. Shiloh. Manuel's hands shook so violently the paper rattled. No, please. We can fix this. I'll fire Rainey from the company. I'll banish her from the city. I'll do whatever you want. Before Shiloh could answer, Manuel's phone rang furiously. He tried to decline it, but the caller ID showed it was the head of security from the Preston corporate headquarters. He answered, his tone furious. What is
it?
I told you not to bother me. Mr. Preston, the security director's frantic voice spilled from the speaker. You need to come to the main office immediately. Miss Christie brought the police and a team of forensic investigators. She uncovered the high-definition security footage from the resort bay where young Master Zach died. Manuel froze. What? The footage you saw earlier was tampered with by Miss Duffy's assistant, the director shouted. Miss Christie brought the original uncorrupted server file. Miss Duffy didn't just take young Master Zach to the beach.
She
deliberately pushed his float into the undertow channel.
Click.
The room descended into a horrific, suffocating silence. Manuel slowly turned his head to look at Shiloh. Shiloh's face did not change. She had already known. She knew Rainey's jealous, malicious nature better than anyone. She had tried to tell Manuel 3 times. And every single time, Manuel had cut her off, calling her paranoid and jealous. Shiloh. Manuel's voice was barely a whisper. The phone slipped from his hand, shattering on the hardwood floor. You knew? I told you, Shiloh said softly, her eyes clear as water. I told you the day
he died.
I said Rainey pushed him. You told me to stop making a scene, because Rainey was fragile. Manuel stumbled backward, catching himself on the edge of the table. The image of his 4-year-old son struggling in the cold water while he was upstairs in a luxury suite comforting Rainey for a scratched knee flashed through his mind like a lightning strike. A sickening wave of nausea hit him. He clutched his stomach, dropping to his
knees. I
killed him. Manuel sobbed, tears finally breaking through his arrogant posture. I protected the monster who killed my boy. He looked up at Shiloh, crawling toward her on his knees, reaching out to touch the hem of her dress. Shiloh. Kill me. Beat me. Do something. Scream at me. Please hit me. Shiloh stepped back, neatly avoiding his hand. Why would I hit you? She asked, looking down at him as if looking at a stray dog on the street. It's raining outside, Manuel. You should go. I have an early flight to Base 0 tomorrow.
No.
Don't leave me. Manuel cried out, his voice echoing helplessly in the small hotel room. Shiloh. I love you. I've always loved you. Shiloh looked at the clock on the wall. It's midnight, she said quietly. The 7 days are over. We are officially divorced, Mr. Preston. The next morning, the financial capital woke up to the biggest scandal in a decade. Rainey Duffy was arrested live on national television at the Preston Group headquarters, handcuffed and dragged away in front of dozens of news cameras. The charges were second-degree murder and evidence tampering. The Preston stock plummeted by 40% in a single hour. Olivia Preston collapsed from a stroke upon hearing the news and was rushed to the ICU. At the same time, a massive press conference was being broadcast across every major network in the country, hosted directly by the National Aerospace Administration. Manuel ran through the airport terminal like a madman. His hair was disheveled, his suit torn and muddy, his eyes bloodshot. He didn't care about his company, his mother, or the media swarming outside his estate. He only had one thought: stop Shiloh. When he finally reached the private military airfield on the outskirts of the city, he was met with a line of heavily armed security personnel and armored vehicles. Sir, stop right there, a guard shouted, raising a rifle. This is a restricted military zone. Let me through, Manuel screamed, trying to push past the barrier. My wife is in there. Shiloh. Mr. Preston. A strict, stern voice spoke up. Professor Vance, the director of the Aerospace Administration, walked out from the command tent, flanked by 2 high-ranking military officers. Manuel fell against the barricade, breathless, tears streaming down his face. Director Vance. Please. Let me see Shiloh. Just 5 minutes. I'm her husband. Director Vance looked at Manuel with disgust and pity. You are not her husband, Mr. Preston, Director Vance said, holding up a black folder. The civil court finalized the dissolution of your marriage 3 hours ago. Professor Shaffer is now a state-level classified asset.
No.
She loves me, Manuel screamed, his voice breaking. She's loved me for 15 years. She scored a 1600 on the SAT for me. She gave up everything for me. And you threw her away for a snake, Director Vance said coldly. Professor Shaffer wasted 15 years on a blind boy who couldn't tell real gold from
Trash.
but her country will not waste her. Director Vance pointed toward the massive jumbo jet idling on the tarmac. The door of the aircraft opened. Shiloh stepped out onto the boarding platform, wearing an immaculate dark blue military-issue research uniform, her hair tied neatly behind her. She looked radiant. The pale, broken woman who had bled in the Preston living room was gone. In her place stood the legendary genius who had once shattered national records, the brightest star of her generation. Shiloh. Manuel shrieked at the top of his lungs, throwing himself against the chain-link fence, his hands getting cut on the barbed wire. Shiloh. Look at me. I'm sorry. I sent Rainey to prison. She's going to get life. I gave up the company. I'll give you everything. Come back down. On the platform, Shiloh paused. She turned her head and looked down toward the fence. Through the tears blurring his vision, Manuel saw her face. He waited for a sign of hesitation, a tear, a flicker of pain, anything that proved she still cared. Shiloh simply looked at him. Then, she raised her hand and gave a polite, distant nod, the kind of nod one gives to a complete stranger met on a train. She turned around, stepped into the cabin, and the heavy titanium door clicked.
Shut. No.
Shiloh. No. Manuel collapsed onto his knees in the mud, clutching his head, sobbing violently as the jet's jet engines roared to life. The blast of wind from the thrusters kicked up dust and rain, blowing over Manuel's shivering body as the plane lifted off, soaring straight into the heavy gray clouds, disappearing toward the vast, infinite sky. 5 years later, the southern desert of Base Zero was now home to the greatest engineering marvel in human history, the ether space elevator, a massive, gleaming carbon nanotube. Cables stretched from the Earth directly into the upper atmosphere, anchoring humanity to the stars. The project had been a resounding global success, ushering in a new era of space exploration. In the central city, the Preston Group was now a shadow of its former glory. Christy Preston had taken over the company, stripping away the old corrupt board members, turning it into a modest, ethical firm. Olivia Preston remained bedridden in a quiet nursing home, paralyzed and unable
To speak.
Rainey Duffy was serving a 30-year sentence in a maximum security prison forgotten by the world. And Manuel Preston lived alone in a small, empty apartment overlooking the desert border. He had given up his wealth, his position, and his luxury.
Every day he sat on
His small balcony, holding a faded photograph of a high school girl smiling shyly while holding a science trophy. On his table sat a bowl of lukewarm chicken soup, made strictly according to the recipe Shiloh had written down for him 5 years ago. He took a sip every day, but no matter how hard he tried, it never tasted the way it did when she made
it.
Suddenly, the large public screen across the street lit up with a live global broadcast. Today marks the 5th anniversary of Project Ether, the news anchor announced. Proudly, we are joined live from the orbital station by Chief Engineer, Professor Shiloh Shaffer. Manuel's hands trembled. He dropped his spoon and stumbled to the edge of the balcony, staring at the screen. On the high-definition display, Shiloh appeared. She was in her early 30s. Now, looking healthy, powerful, and deeply calm. Her eyes were bright, reflecting the blue light of the Earth spinning beneath her in zero gravity. Professor Shaffer, the reporter asked, you have spent 5 years in space, isolated from the world below. Do you ever feel lonely? Do you ever regret leaving your old life behind? Shiloh smiled. It was a beautiful, clear smile, one free of any burden, grief, or shadow. Never, Shiloh answered, her voice echoing clearly across millions of screens. Worldwide. Down there, I thought my world was small, bounded by tiny misunderstandings and fragile promises. But up here, surrounded by the stars, I realized how vast the universe truly is. I left nothing behind that was worth keeping. Manuel stood on his balcony, the desert wind blowing cold against his withered
face.
He raised his eyes from the screen, looking up at the night sky. High above the clouds, a tiny, brilliant beam of light shone steadily among the stars, far beyond his reach, far beyond his touch, shining bright and free, never to look down again.